Today is the 6th day of Elul and the 9th of September. And we're going to... There was another sentence or two that we didn't read in chapter 18, but it's just a repetition. So let's skip to 19. We ended with the very important explanation of the difference between Echad and Yachid. That Yachid means Hashem as He is to Himself, and He's singular, there's nothing else. And Echad means that He is enclosed, He's the life force, He's what unifies everything after creation. So Yachid is like before creation, Echad is after creation. But then he added at the end that the oneness is created through nullification, and this nullification is as if the things that were created were not created. As if. He says that the oneness is caused by things being nullified to God. They have to nullify themselves. Bittul b'metzius, he calls it. So he says this nullification is as if the thing doesn't exist, but it does exist, of course. We're not saying that the world is imaginary, it's real. But the level of nullification is such that it feels as if things don't exist. And things to themselves feel like they don't exist. So that's what we ended with. Now, he's going to give us... So that was... And we said that it's beginning to build the tension between the multiplicity and the singularity of Hashem. There's multiplicity in the world, singularity of Hashem. In this chapter 19, he's going to give us the main mashal, the main parable that's used in Chassidus, that was innovated, to the best of my knowledge, by the Alter Rebbe, to understand this relationship between the multiplicity of creation and the singularity of Hashem. And the way that the Alter Rebbe always taught it, he taught it very simply. He asked the question, why does the Torah use the parable of God speaking in order to describe creation? Could have used many things. It could have just said to create. But it doesn't say God created. It adds this extra parable that God spoke. He said, let there be light, and there was light. Just say He created light. What do you need the speech for? What does the speech add to this whole understanding of creation? So the Alter Rebbe saw speech as a necessary element because it's what allows us to understand the skip, as it were, the jump, and the relationship between Hashem's singularity and the multiplicity of reality. Okay, so let's see. And here the Tzemach Tzedek, what he's going to do is he's going to take this parable of speech and he's going to lap it onto the word Echad. He's going to give us it's like a continuation of what we just said, that Echad is His oneness in the world, but he's going to break it down into three parts, as we'll see in a moment, and from that he's going to build the parable. So let's see. Another interpretation in the word Echad. So we have three letters in Echad. Aleph, Chet, and Dalet. The Aleph represents Hashem as Yachid, as singular, as we said. His essence beyond the world, outside the world. The Ches, hu B'chinat Chochma Ila'a. The Ches is the first letter of Chochma. Which Chochma are we talking about? The wisdom called the supernal wisdom. Why? Because there's many levels of wisdom. Here he means supernal wisdom. We'll see why in a moment. V'adalet, and the final dalet in Echad, which is, we said, a major dalet, it's bigger, hu b'chinat dibur ha'elyon, dvar melech shilton. So dalet is the first letter of speech, dibur. So we have yachid, chokhmah, dibur. It's almost like it would say yachad, but it's echad. Okay? What's so special about speech? Dvar melech shilton. Midat malchuto yitbarach, because there's a saying in the Talmud, first of all in Ecclesiastes, bidvar melech shilton, that sovereignty goes through the speech of the king. Meaning, the king's speech is his sovereignty. Because if they don't listen to what he says, he's no longer a king. It's a very simple idea. If the king cannot command, he's not a king. So speech is a euphemism. It's a synonym for malchus, for kingdom, for sovereignty. ובזה נרמז כל סדר ההשתלשלות והתהוות הריבוי מן האחדות הפשוטה יתברך. And through this, these three letters, Aleph, Chet, Daled, Yachid, Chochma, Malchus, we have a shortened, condensed version of everything that we call the order of the coming down of Hashem into reality. Ishtalshelus. Ishtalshelus, we said, is like a cause and effect. And he uses this specifically because there are many mechanisms by which you can describe creation. Here he's choosing the one that was used by the philosophers, Ishtalshelus. Ishtalshelus means that there is a primary cause and it has an effect, and the effect has another effect, and so on. So it's a chain of cause and effect. And this is not what Kabbalah uses. Kabbalah doesn't use the cause and effect. Kabbalah skips. It has skips, big skips in the middle. Because it's also grappling with the problem, how do you get multiplicity out of singularity? So you say, the only way you can do this is if there's some kind of leap. For instance, same thing we have in physics today, that we have the quantum world. We have what seems to us to be a very quantified world, which means that packets of energy can only come in packets. You can't get half a packet, and you can't cut it down as much as you want. So that's like it's an extension of the atomistic perspective of the Greeks. It's saying that the world is quantized. Not only is energy this way, but essentially spaces and time also. So one of the paradoxes that comes out of this is that our experience of space seems to be continuous.
Essentially packets, so to speak.
But actually space is,
yeah.
Like when you think about your screen. So any screen has small dots, which can be a certain color. And there's many of them packed into every square inch, so you get a very nice continuous picture. But if you look at it very closely, you see that it's not. It's actually discrete. It's quantized. All of modern technology is playing on fooling the brain. All of modern technology, everything, is about, right, everything is how do you create a continuous experience out of discrete elements. So we have this thing called the Nyquist theorem, which is for math, and it helps us do all kinds of communications and how you need to manipulate Fourier transforms. A lot of math went into this. It's actually not so difficult. I even understood most of it. But the essential point, though, is that it seems that at its basic level, reality is actually quantized. It's not continuous. But our experience is continuous. So, Zeno's famous paradox, a whole series of paradoxes, they all show the same problem. How do you get from continuous motion to a quantized reality? So he says, imagine that the arrow is being shot, and the arrow has to travel through an infinite number of points. Why an infinite number? Because our experience is continuous, so we assume that there must be as many points as you want along the trajectory of the arrow, along the path of the arrow. But if each point takes a finite amount of time to traverse, then it should take the arrow an infinite amount of time to get to the target, which it doesn't. From our experience, we know that doesn't happen. Then he has the tortoise and the hare, and he has all the kinds of different strings of paradoxes to show this problem between the continuous and the discrete, between the quantized world and the continuous experience that the brain gives us. So which is it? Which is true? So the paradoxes have no real answer. Basically, what they say is there's two ways of describing reality:
Yeah, right.
quantized or not quantized. But when it comes to philosophy, this becomes a huge problem, because basically, if you're saying that there is an infinite string of events that happen for everything that's happening, then that's one picture. And the way the Kabbalah sees it is that there's a skip. It's quantized. It's not just quantized in the sense that there's, small, tiny fragments. It's saying from the world of emanation to the world of creation, there's a huge skip.
Yeah.
And what we mean by a skip is it's quantized. The world of emanation does not continuously transform into the world of creation.
There's
It's a whole skip that you have to go, a whole leap that you have to go through. In general, in Kabbalah, they talk about 3 different leaps.
Which could go into the minutiae, so to speak.
No, but there's a principle in Kabbalah that's called Ein Aroch. Ein Aroch means without measure, or incommensurate, which is another way of saying that things are not continuous, meaning that they skip from one thing to the other, so you can't compare from here to here.
Yeah.
There's a skip in the middle.
But
he's not going to use Kabbalistic language.
Oh.
That's how Kabbalah solves the problem between the singular and the multiplicity. This is a skip.
Yeah.
And then magic happens.
Yeah.
Scientists don't like it, but they do it all the time anyway, because there's no getting around it. So Kabbalah does it a big time, and it says there's a big skip from here to here. We don't understand how it happens, that's how it is. But here he doesn't want to use that. He wants to use the philosophical language, and the philosophical language was more prone to a continuous reality, even though you could also argue that there's discrete points there, but the point was that there's a lot more continuity. And so Kabbalah calls it the chain of cause and effect. Philosophy calls it the chain of cause and effect. This is called Seder Ishtalshelus. In Chassidus, they use the same language. Now, it's not that Seder Ishtalshelus did not show up in Kabbalistic writings. Of course it did, because Kabbalistic writings took a long time to develop their own language. So for a long time they were borrowing language from the Jewish philosophers, and Jewish philosophers use this language of a Seder Ishtalshelus. So you'll find it in Kabbalistic writings. Okay, so now we have this chain of cause and effect. V'itavut haribui min achdut hapshuta yitbarach, and we have from it the coming into being of the multiplicity out of the simple singularity. Now we're going to have to join the two. Shu al yedei emtzaut itlabshut or ensof bechokma ilah. So he says there's one place that I have to use the skip. Where is it? From the Yachid to the wisdom. We said Aleph is the Yachid, Chet is the supernal wisdom. Here he says, when you want to say that there is no continuity, when you want to say that there's like some kind of a skip, so you can either call it a skip, or another language for it is enclothement. Why enclothement is not like Ishtalshelus, why it's not like cause and effect, is a big discussion. But the way to understand it is, I think the closest thing that we can use to understand it is like Windows or our phones. All these operating systems, they all use the same principle, which is that you switch between programs. And so you have your screen, which is showing what's active right now, and by hitting either swiping or by Control Tab or whatever it is, you switch between different realities. So these switches are enclothement, really. You're saying, until now, this app was enclosed in my screen. Now I'm going to enclose this app in my screen. And there's a skip there, because it's not continuous. It's not like it slowly morphs into the other. It's like the whole memory is swiped, is switched, and you use a different part of the memory and you put straight into the screen, and you have your whole app the way it was when you left it. So this is called islavshus. It's called enclothement. It's like something is enclothing within something else. So he says that at the first level we have to say there's enclothement, but after that after that enclosement, then you want to say that from chokhmah to dibur, from wisdom, supernal wisdom, to speech, it's a process of ishtalshelus, of this cause and effect descent. And where did the first stage happen? K'ma'amar Bereishit bara bechukhmata bara. So we see this in the first two words of the Torah. In the beginning God created, which is translated in the Aramaic translations of the Torah, specifically the Yerushalmi, the translation called the Yerushalmi, a translation called Yonatan ben Uziel. In these two it says that Bereishit means with wisdom. Why? Okay, there's a verse, Rashi even alludes to it in the first Rashi. He says, Reshit Chokhmah, wisdom is the beginning of all things. So, okay, so we have this thing that when God created, He created with wisdom. Ve'aba yasad brata, and if you want to see it in the Zohar calls it, the father then founds the daughter. Shehi b'chinat olam hadibur. That's the third stage here, the dibur, the speech. So from the wisdom, which is what God created the world with. So here you have to have some kind of enclosement, some kind of skip, some kind of leap. But then from then on, it's Seder Ishtalshelus. We call this the order of cause and effect, or evolution sometimes we call it. But it's not to be confused with evolution, so I don't usually use that translation, although it's correct. And that is, where is everything going to happen? It's going to happen in the world of speech. It's only in the speech that you begin to get the multiplicity. So what does he have here? He has, there's God's singularity, that's the Aleph. Then there's an intermediate stage called wisdom, supernal wisdom. We don't know what it does yet, we'll see in a moment. Supernal wisdom is apparently not a multiplicity yet. It's still a singularity, it's still singular, but it has an effect on where a multiplicity is going to be appearing, which is in the speech. Okay? And there's a verse that captures this in Tehillim. It says, how many are your actions, Hashem? You've created all, you've made all with wisdom. So the many, rabu means many. How many are your actions, Hashem? Okay? It comes from Chokhmah. You did all this with Chokhmah. So there's this implicit understanding in this verse that wisdom is responsible for the multiplicity. Malaretz kinanecha, and then the earth is full with your acquisitions, with what you've created becomes your acquisition. Perush שהקושייה מה רבו מעשיך, היינו איך יכול להיות התהוות הריבוי מן האחדות הפשוטה. And he says, what this verse is saying is, it's starting actually with a problem, with a question. How can it be that there should be multiplicity out of singularity? Meaning, how did Hashem do this? And the answer is that God did this through His wisdom. So wisdom becomes this intermediary force which is able to create multiplicity out of singularity. And the multiplicity is what we say that the world is full of His acquisitions, and this is through the world of speech. This whole process of speech. So that's what we're going to begin looking at tomorrow. And he's going to explain this parable in some length, even compared to the Tanya. And the Tanya doesn't explain it so long as he does here. And we'll see how wisdom and speech now create multiplicity.